The dawn of the revelation felt entirely mundane. You wouldn't find any flashy press releases or breaking news banners, only a silent alteration buried within a web page. Right at the crack of dawn, the International Skating Union refreshed their official competitor roster for the 2026 World Figure Skating Championships, taking place in Prague. Normally, this is just a standard bureaucratic tweak, the sort of everyday paperwork adjustment that occurs constantly. Trainers scan through it, committee bureaucrats glance it over, and a handful of hardcore enthusiasts constantly monitor the page. The general public completely misses these things, yet someone caught the discrepancy this time around. A prominent figure who graced the page just 24 hours earlier had vanished without a trace. Alysa Liu, the undisputed queen of the ice, the reigning global title holder, and the freshly minted Olympic champion from Milan, erased from the bracket. United States figure skating issued absolutely zero memos. Her management remained totally tight-lipped, and her social media feeds were dead silent. All that remained was a modified lineup, now indicating that merely 3 American ladies were packing their bags for the Czech capital. Amber Glenn, Isabel Levito, and second-string reserve Sarah Everhard were tapped to go, stepping up since Brady Tennell had previously passed on the opportunity. In a matter of minutes, message boards exploded with frantic activity as supporters aggressively reloaded their browsers. Captured images flooded Twitter timelines, while shocked rumors multiplied like wildfire across Reddit communities and frantic Discord chat rooms. Hold on, could this actually be true? Initially, the collective assumption was that a simple clerical error had occurred. Competitors drop out constantly, yet that normally comes accompanied by an official declaration, a medical report, or a governing body memo. Here, the community got nothing but absolute, deafening quiet. In the realm of elite athletics, that kind of void breeds intense anxiety, mainly because Alysa was far from a run-of-the-mill contender making up the numbers. She held the crown. She was the reigning champion of the entire globe. Moreover, just weeks prior, on the 19th of February beneath the bright lights of Milan, she skated the absolute masterpiece of her career, capturing Olympic glory, 2 golden medals, to be exact. Within a mere 30 days, her status had evolved from being a highly esteemed athlete into an entirely different stratosphere. She had morphed into a worldwide phenomenon. That exact phenomenal rise is what made her sudden roster evaporation so incredibly jarring. Those who conquer the globe traditionally fight to protect their throne. Gold medalists from the Winter Games almost always make an appearance at the subsequent global showdown. It is simply the established heartbeat of the competitive season. You conquer the Olympic stage in February, then you dominate the planet in March. Yet out of nowhere, Alysa pulled the plug on the trip, leaving the masses desperate for answers. Countless followers feared she had suffered a devastating physical setback, while others speculated that the grueling winter campaign had drained her completely dry. Meanwhile, a handful of veteran insiders whispered a totally contrasting theory. They claimed they saw this coming from a mile away. Delve deep into the chaotic aftermath immediately following her Italian triumph, and her sudden withdrawal transforms from a mystery into perfect logic. To truly grasp the situation, however, we need to dial the clock back. Return to the very evening she secured her ultimate victory. The second Alysa's blades left that Milanese rink, her reality did not hit the brakes. Instead, it shifted into overdrive, and hardly in the glamorous fashion the public fantasizes about. For 20 agonizingly fast days following that spectacular final, her itinerary was an absolute blur. Bouncing from metropolis to metropolis, enduring back-to-back interrogations from reporters, posing under flashing studio lights, and tackling endless promotional gigs. Every single corner of the athletic universe demanded a slice of her newfound fame. Yet hidden deep within that relentless hurricane of publicity, a subtle undercurrent was shifting. It was a hushed development that flew completely under the radar of her adoring crowds. Tiny red flags, minor remarks dropped during press junkets, and seemingly innocent interactions that appeared completely benign at the time. But viewing them through the lens of hindsight, they carry an entirely different weight. They act as heavy foreshadowing subtle clues, indicating that the most monumental choice of her entire career would occur far from the frozen arena. The verdict was destined to be reached miles away from any stadium. Cracking the code behind her sudden erasure from the Czech roster requires a raw look into the reality of her past 3 weeks. Because those 21 days bore zero resemblance to an athlete gearing up for global combat, not by a long shot. In truth, her days mirrored an entirely different beast, a deeply personal transition of massive proportions. And for a 20-year-old girl who had just been thrust into the blinding spotlight of international glory, the pressure was likely suffocating. Yet the exact instance that pivoted the entire narrative did not unfold at a skating facility. It went down inside an airport terminal. When the champion finally dropped a brief, cryptic social media update regarding the incident, the masses began connecting the dots. Her sudden vanishing act possessed a deeply intimate reasoning that nobody saw coming. Hey, if this mystery has you hooked, drop a comment below and let me know which corner of the globe you are tuning in from tonight. I absolutely love discovering the worldwide reach of these tales. You see, the ensuing chapter of this saga kicks off a mere few hours after she touched down from Italy, and the grueling timetable that awaited her is the master key that unlocks the entire mystery. The instant she departed Italian soil following her triumphant Winter Games, the atmosphere was strikingly serene. There were no flashy chartered planes or sprawling bodyguard details, merely a standard commercial Delta airliner bound for the California coast. Eyewitnesses claim the cabin crew discreetly bumped her up to first class the second they recognized the very important person in their midst. The staff insisted that shoving a freshly minted golden girl in coach was practically a crime. It was an incredibly touching, beautifully normal human interaction. For a fleeting handful of hours, the chaos paused. She finally closed her eyes and caught her breath. Upon touching down in the Bay Area, her first destination shocked practically everyone. She skipped the broadcasting booths and dodged the media scrums entirely, opting instead to hit up a local eatery. It was a humble little joint in Alameda, where word has it she devoured a slice of tiramisu and confessed to the chef that it was quite possibly the greatest dessert she had ever eaten. At first glance, you would swear she was merely a typical 20-year-old basking in a massive victory, sharing a warm dinner surrounded by loved ones. She enjoyed a handful of peaceful afternoons kicking back with her siblings, yet that tranquility was doomed to shatter. The golden hardware from the Olympics had already unleashed its magic. The relentless fame engine roared to life, and before the week was out, her calendar was overflowing so violently it could induce vertigo in the most seasoned sports veterans. From the crack of dawn on breakfast broadcasts to the glittering sets of late-night television, producers at the Today Show were clamoring for her presence. Jimmy Fallon was practically begging for a sit-down, while major broadcasting giants who traditionally ignored the ice rink suddenly scrambled to secure an exclusive chat. The heavyweights lined up CBS, NBC, ABC, and ESPN falling like dominoes, immediately followed by the fashion glossies, with Teen Vogue demanding she headline their next front page. Even Rolling Stone booked a massive spotlight piece out in Manhattan, throwing her into an endless whirlwind of flashing cameras, promotional blitzes, deep-dive podcasts, and on-stage panels. During one particularly surreal afternoon, she found herself tucked away inside an ultra-exclusive, velvet-roped Manhattan lounge for yet another glamorous editorial shoot, where a high-end baker presented her with custom-made Lucky Charms treats because the production crew had dug into her childhood cravings. It was an enchanting, wildly flattering experience, yet utterly suffocating. For practically 20 consecutive days, her face was plastered across every imaginable platform. She was ping-ponged from soundstage to soundstage, waking up in the Big Apple before jetting off to the Golden State, drowning in an endless sea of forced smiles, firm handshakes, and flashing bulbs. However, if you scrutinize that chaotic itinerary, a glaring, impossible conflict begins to emerge from the shadows. Throughout this entire media circus, she was officially slated to be gearing up for the World Championships, which brings a gripping twist to her unfolding saga. After all, preparing for a global showdown on the ice is hardly a casual hobby you wedge between commercial breaks. Holding on to a global crown demands grueling dedication, flawless, free skate rehearsals, agonizing repetition of triple jumps, and lung-burning physical conditioning. It requires bleeding hours onto the frozen rink, entirely removed from luxury hotel suites, the backstage VIP areas at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, or 30,000-foot flights between gigs. Veteran voices within the skating community started whispering their concerns the second the Olympic flame extinguished, recognizing that her chronological runway was incredibly unforgiving. The final bows in Beijing wrapped on February 21st, while the grand stage in Prague was set to ignite on March 24th, leaving a razor-thin margin of exactly 31 days. That narrow corridor is everything. For top-tier competitors, those 31 sunsets are obsessively devoted to tweaking routines and restoring depleted endurance following the monumental games. Yet, the day-to-day existence of this young champion painted a starkly contrasting, far more chaotic picture. In the blink of an eye, she had morphed from a mere sportswoman into a global cultural phenomenon, watching her Instagram metrics skyrocket into the stratosphere. Literally millions of fresh admirers flooded her feeds within weeks. Corporate sponsors waved blank checks in her face, reporters fought tooth and nail for exclusives, and out of nowhere, the fiercely focused girl who once thrived in the silent isolation of the rink was abruptly thrust into an alien dimension. It was an unforgiving ecosystem built on blinding flashes, piercing spotlights, and itineraries that offered absolutely zero mercy. For a naive 20-year-old completely unaccustomed to such blinding stardom, the sheer magnitude of public scrutiny felt like a suffocating tidal wave. However, mere celebrity exhaustion cannot account for her sudden, mysterious withdrawal from the Czech Republic roster. The true turning point struck with chilling clarity a few nights later. This shift did not happen under studio lights or behind a glamorous camera lens. It unfolded in the profoundly mundane setting of a commercial airport terminal. The incident that transpired near those baggage carousels was severe enough to push her out of her quiet shell, forcing her to issue a public warning. It arrived as a fleeting, singular social media post, yet her phrasing was strikingly blunt, instantly sending a deep, unsettling shiver through her entire fanbase. Gone was the bubbly post-win joy, replaced by a palpable dread embedded within a midnight upload. No official press release, merely a raw, unfiltered 24-hour story. She had just touched down on the tarmac, dragging her luggage after enduring yet another exhausting leg of her cross-country odyssey. Most likely returning from some high-profile sit-down or celebrity gala, surviving just one more brutal checkpoint on an inescapable publicity crusade. Her typed text was brief, yet it entirely derailed the celebratory narrative overnight, detailing how she walked into the arrivals hall only to find a mob aggressively swarming the sliding doors, a chaotic mass of clicking shutters, frantic autograph hunters, and devotees desperately lunging for a piece of her. Navigating a fan frenzy comes with the territory of holding golden hardware, but the admission that followed sent a legitimate chill down the spine. She explicitly stated that an unidentified person had actively stalked her, not merely wandering in the same direction, but physically tracking her footsteps straight to her passenger door. She recounted being actively hunted down in the parking structure, capping off the chilling admission with a sentence that echoed as a desperate boundary rather than an angry rant. She simply begged the public to never subject her to that terror again, ending the ordeal without a grand emotional monologue, yet making it abundantly clear a dangerous threshold had been breached. For countless supporters, this terrifying anecdote shattered the illusion of digital stardom, proving that viral analytics often mask a much darker, tangible reality. 7 million loyalists, 8 million online spectators. Those metrics are nothing more than pixels glowing on a smartphone, whereas a faceless shadow sprinting behind you across a desolate concrete lot is pure nightmare fuel. It is deeply visceral and terrifyingly intimate, especially jarring for a girl whose entire existence was defined by absolute, micromanaged perfection on the ice. Suddenly plunging into that level of lawless, uncontrollable chaos is enough to trigger sheer panic, particularly when you dig into the archives of her storied career and realize that this was hardly her first dramatic vanishing act from the competitive arena. Back when she was merely 16 years old, she abruptly pulled the plug on her entire skating journey, offering a justification that left the athletic world absolutely stunned. She confessed that the ice had slowly morphed from her sanctuary into an unbearable weight upon her shoulders. Speaking to the press, she painted a picture of total surrender. Her daily routine, her personal choices, and even her public image had been snatched right out of her own hands. Her psychological state had plummeted into a dark abyss, her exact phrasing, not mine, prompting a total 2-year vanishing act from the high-stakes arena. Then, when her highly anticipated return finally materialized in 2024, she laid down an absolute, non-negotiable ultimatum: total autonomy. She tore down her old career and resurrected it entirely by her own rules, handpicking her soundtracks, commanding her practice hours, and assembling her own inner circle. Insiders revealed her deepest vow. The rink would never again become her prison, and the moment the pressure thickened, she was prepared to walk away. She broadcasted this mindset to anyone holding a microphone, and for a beautiful, fleeting period, that exact mantra was a flawless formula. Gliding across the ice with untethered grace and visible peace, she triggered an absolute miracle, capturing the ultimate prize of Olympic gold. Make that 2 of them. Actually, the absolute pinnacle of her athletic universe. Though triumph always carries a treacherous venom, it breeds a suffocating level of scrutiny. Without warning, The very woman who had painstakingly engineered a quiet, harmonious existence found herself thrown into the blinding, relentless glare of the world stage. Endless press junkets, chaotic promotional blitzes, throngs of fans mobbing arrival gates, and millions of unblinking eyes dissecting her every breath. Amidst this whirlwind of deafening chaos, a single heavy shadow loomed over her, the looming specter of the World Championships. Was a trip to Prague genuinely on the horizon? During one candid sit-down, Alysa confronted the speculation head-on, dropping a deeply fascinating hint. Noting that the late March tournament was rapidly approaching, she admitted she was still wrestling with whether she would even lace up her skates for it. Though she expressed a genuine desire to participate, she deliberately pointed toward a looming shadow, a massive, unavoidable obligation slated for April. That was the Stars on Ice spectacle, a sweeping exhibition where elite champions dazzle audiences from coast to coast across the United States. Rewatching that specific piece of footage today, you hear a voice steeped in careful contemplation rather than a simple brush-off. It was merely the sound of a young woman quietly trying to untangle the chaotic puzzle of her upcoming 6 weeks on Earth. Juggling intense rink sessions, television spots, massive galas, and endless flights meant an impending breaking point, a storm that could only be quelled by one massive sweeping choice. Yet, this monumental verdict did not just fall out of the sky. Analyzing the timeline reveals that the breadcrumbs had been scattered all along. They were subtle whispers and tiny red flags that completely slipped past the radar of the masses. These subtle indicators proved that Alysa Liu was simply honoring her most sacred, unbreakable vow, honoring the boundaries of her own mind and body. The moment her official stance on Prague broke, the public was already light years behind her chaotic reality, utterly mesmerized by her seemingly flawless exterior. Boasting a pair of ultimate Olympic triumphs, an exploding digital fanbase, and corporate titans practically begging for her signature. Network executives were hurling broadcast offers her way daily, painting the illusion of invincibility, though the brutal reality of professional athletics told a much darker narrative. The unforgiving grind of the figure skating circuit essentially suffocates its competitors with a terrifying lack of downtime. Once the February Winter Games conclude, the global title battle strikes barely 4 weeks later, a notoriously savage, whiplash-inducing transition unmatched in global athletics. For the vast majority of competitors, that specific window is swallowed entirely by physical rehabilitation and grueling tactical refinement. Zero flights, zero outside noise, just frozen isolation keeping their routines lethal and ensuring every single leap remains flawlessly calibrated. Athletes must desperately regenerate their shattered endurance after the traumatizing marathon of the Games, which made Alysa's trajectory so incredibly bizarre to witness. Over the previous 3 weeks, her reality bared absolutely zero resemblance to a warrior gearing up for international combat. Instead, her frantic itinerary perfectly mirrored the glamorous chaos of an A-list superstar. Bouncing between television sets, magazine shoots, and cross-country press tours triggered hushed whispers among industry elites, rumors that felt undeniably true the moment they escaped into the air. The creeping realization was that the Czech Republic was never actually on her radar, not due to a lack of skill, but because the merciless clock simply refused to align. The Ultimate Winter Tournament wrapped up on February 21st, with global title warm-ups launching near March 22nd, leaving a microscopic gap of 31 days. That was the absolute maximum breathing room. Yet within those brief 31 days, Alysa had obliterated a promotional marathon that takes most veterans 12 months to conquer. She had been completely swallowed by the relentless roaring engine of worldwide stardom. A digital commentator noted online that following her historic victory, absolutely no one could have anticipated the nuclear detonation of public obsession that followed. In a matter of days, her online empire surged past the million-follower mark, unlocking an absolute goldmine of staggering monetary wealth. Corporate alignments, massive commercial deals, and high-profile cameos flooded in lightning-in-a-bottle breakthroughs that almost never strike the same competitor twice. For a 20-year-old talent who had never raked in major payouts from her sport before, this sudden avalanche of wealth was impossible to ignore. The financial security was undeniably life-changing, but the urgency was even greater. The iron was burning hot in that exact moment, and the entire world knew this golden era had an expiration date. Yet, boiling her motivations down to mere dollar signs or chasing cameras drastically misses the mark. If vanity or greed were the drivers, the entire atmosphere of her exit would carry a much colder vibe. On the contrary, Those embedded deep within the ice skating hierarchy frame her sudden exit through an entirely different lens, an unwavering consistency to her own truth. That single theme echoes relentlessly throughout her journey. Ever since stepping back onto the ice in 2024, the champion has laid down a rock-solid, uncompromising boundary. Her own inner voice rules above all else. Whenever the grind threatens to break her, she pulls the plug, and if her calendar starts suffocating her, she brutally rewrites it. She once threw out a casual yet razor-sharp warning that should anyone dare dictate even the most trivial details of her life, such as how she wore her hair or what she did off the rink, she would vanish in a heartbeat. While the rest of the sporting universe might brush those words off as mere hyperbole, they actually formed the unbreakable bedrock of Alysa Liu's spectacular second act. She completely reimagined her time on the ice to revolve entirely around inner peace, loved ones, and absolute liberty. Therefore, as her glorious Olympic triumph inevitably resurrected the suffocating spotlight that originally drove her into exile, a deep-seated survival instinct kicked in immediately without any theatrical flair, without any grand press conferences, but rather through a silent, ironclad resolution. The moment she locked in that choice, the dominoes fell with absolute inevitability. Just like that, she vanished from the official roster. The American squad heading to Prague quickly reshuffled, bringing Sarah Everhart into the fold alongside Amber Glenn and Isabeau Levito, ready to carry the banner for the United States, meaning the biggest global showdown of the season would plow ahead completely missing its freshly crowned queen. Yet, the true plot twist lies in how the community reacted to this massive shift. Behind the curtains of the fiercely competitive figure skating realm, almost nobody is hitting the panic button over her stunning withdrawal. Quite the opposite, insiders view this bold exit as absolute proof that her master plan is unfolding flawlessly, knowing full well that the exhausted girl who quit at age 16 felt utterly stripped of her agency. In stark contrast, the 20-year-old superstar walking away from the global stage today radiates absolute sovereignty, and that monumental psychological shift will undoubtedly become the hallmark of her future legacy. Where does the narrative go from here? Exactly 3 weeks from today, the international spectacular in the Czech capital will ignite right on schedule. Thousands of screaming fans will pack the grandstands, the opening notes will echo through the frigid air, the technical panel will take their familiar spots behind the rinkside glass, and a brand new gold medalist will ascend the podium. Except, that golden girl will not be our reigning Olympic victor. Consequently, the Stars and Stripes will fly over a distinctly reshaped trio. Stepping into the veteran role, Amber Glenn hits the ice carrying the heaviest arsenal of international experience for her nation. She rides a massive wave of momentum straight from the Winter Games, where a jaw-dropping free skate catapulted her all the way from 13th to an incredible 5th-place finish. That exact breed of battle-tested grit is practically a cheat code for conquering the high-stakes pressure cooker of a world-tier event. Joining her will be Isabeau Levito, arriving armed with a formidable aura cultivated over multiple grueling seasons, cementing her status as a breathtaking maestro of artistic and technical fluidity. Rounding out the fiercely competitive American triad is Sarah Everhart, the standby skater who was unexpectedly shoved into the blinding limelight of a lifetime. Receiving that fateful notice undoubtedly sent absolute shockwaves through Everhart's reality. A mere second ago, you were just keeping your legs warm just in case, and suddenly you are headlining the most prestigious tournament on Earth. A brutal reminder of the sport's breakneck velocity. On a wider scale, the battlefield for the ultimate crown wildly reshapes itself the second our champion bows out. Countless skating pundits are aggressively pointing to Japan's Kaori Sakamoto as the terrifyingly dominant frontrunner for the gold in Prague, citing her relentless speed and rock-solid technique as the ultimate winning formula. Furthermore, a hungry new generation of phenoms emerging out of both Japanese and South Korean training camps threatens to set the leaderboard ablaze. To put it bluntly, the bloodbath for the medals will remain absolutely ferocious, yet the atmosphere hovering over the rink will carry a phantom weight, knowing the undisputed queen of the ice is casually observing the chaos from a faraway couch. This glaring empty space on the roster forces die-hard spectators to confront a fascinating philosophical dilemma. How does a generational talent ultimately define true victory? Since the dawn of the sport, glory has been ruthlessly calculated through a rigid, cold-blooded matrix. Chunks of metal around the neck, historic point totals, and championship banners. The establishment has always glorified those martyrs who grind their bodies into dust, marching endlessly from one brutal contest to the next, Yet this particular skater already shattered that toxic illusion. The moment she hung up her skates at age 16, the world collectively assumed the ink had dried on her tragic final chapter. In reality, that devastating departure sparked an unprecedented rebellion. She stormed back 24 months later, completely rewrote the rules of engagement, and healed her fractured bond with the ice. Following that spectacular resurrection, she scaled the absolute summit of athletic immortality, capturing the ultimate Olympic prize. Barely a few weeks after touching the sky, she throws another massive curveball that will undoubtedly leave traditionalists scratching their heads. Walking away from a global title defense sounds like madness, but peering closely at the architectural blueprint of her revival makes the brilliant strategy underneath crystal clear. She refuses to be a slave to the endless competitive grind, fiercely guarding the personal sanctuary she painstakingly constructed during her teenage exile. She holds fiercely onto her hard-won equilibrium, her absolute independence, and the empowering realization that she owns her career rather than letting the sport own her. Viewed through this revolutionary lens, bailing on the Czech capital is far from a cowardly retreat. It serves as the ultimate mic drop, a thunderous validation of the exact mindset that dragged her back from the brink of permanent retirement. Had she remained the terrified teenager who drowned under the crushing expectations, she would have swallowed her misery and skated until her spirit broke. The unstoppable force of nature standing before us today flipped the script entirely. She tuned into her own soul, hit the brakes, and boldly carved out a detour. Fans probably won't witness her lace up for battle again until the frost settles over the late 2026 competitive calendar. Expect fresh choreographies, vastly evolved ambitions, and quite possibly the explosive opening scenes of yet another breathtaking march toward Olympic glory. Should destiny pull her back, this fateful spring departure will not be remembered as a surrender, but merely a gripping breath before the next act begins. After all, a champion's truest test rarely unfolds under the harsh glare of a panel. The heaviest choices are always forged in total, chilling silence. That leaves me wondering where you stand on all this. Put yourself in Alysa Liu's skates for a second. Would you step away entirely, or risk everything on Czech ice to fiercely protect your hard-earned crown? Drop your verdict down below. Also, if you crave these gripping, untold narratives hiding behind the flashy athletic news, go ahead and join our community. For out on the frozen rink, mirroring reality itself, the most captivating tales always unfold exactly where the dazzling arena lights fade to black.